So this goes back to the question of how of root causes. Now, I mean, I'm very keen to as I say, to learn about ways in which we can address the root causes of poverty. And when I was a graduate student, I was offered the opportunity to intern for and work for the World Bank. And I was given the opportunity to examine a range of classified World Bank documents to see how the World Bank was talking about poverty, about the ways that it was tackling the poor. And I thought, well, I'll do that. I mean, classified documents, an insight into one of the world's largest organizations designed to tackle poverty. I'll do that. Now, it turns out that the examination of these documents wasn't going to be a critical examination of these documents. Instead, it turned out that those documents were used to create basically a sort of puff piece called "Voices of the Poor. Can Anyone Hear Us?" Now, I mean, it's important to get a sense of what the World Bank does and how it operates. And if you don't know anything about the World Bank, I have a small contribution to the world of pedagogy, and it relies on a metaphor that comes from the Terry Gilliam film Time Bandits. Now, if you don't know about Time Bandits is a film about disgruntled former employees of God. Now, the story is that God built the world in 6 days, so it was a rush job. And God couldn't do it all by himself. He had help. But he treats his labor very badly. And so they run off with a map of the universe and with its imperfections. And they use the holes in the universe to rob people. And so in one scene, they rob Napoleon. And they jump through a hole in time with all Napoleon's stuff. And they end up in Sherwood Forest, where they're met by Robin Hood, who's played by John Cleese as a sort of upper-class twit. He's wearing a sort of bright green hat, and he calls himself Hood. And Hood's very excited by all Napoleon stuff, and he says, well, this is tremendous. Well, thank you very much indeed. What can I say? The poor will love this. Have you met the poor? The charming people. Of course, they don't have 2 pennies to rub together, but that's because they're poor. And there's a scene where Napoleon stuff is given away to the poor, and the poor are brought, and bring on the poor, and Hood works the line, and he's sort of, gilded mirror for you, yes, how long have you been poor? Jolly good, and congratulations, rubies for you. And right next to him is this big hulking bloke who takes whatever Hood has given and punches the poor person in the face. So that's kind of how the World Bank works. It's in the business of making these large loans, but it is also a bank, so it takes those loans back, and it punches. The punch in the face comes from the policies that this organization imposes on developing countries, policies that have, for example, in agriculture, led to a decimation of agriculture in, say, Africa. This is not me making this assessment. In fact, the World Bank a couple of years ago admitted that its policies had been a disaster in sub-Saharan Africa. Now, I say all this because there is this sort of need within the World Bank to have reassurance that what it's doing is right. A moment of saying, well, some of our best friends are poor people. Have you met the poor? We had lunch with them yesterday. They love us. And that's what I ended up doing. My job was to be part of a research team looking at these research reports on poverty, and the reports that we wrote, the voices of the poor, can anyone hear us, was basically a long way for the World Bank to say, well, have you met them? We had lunch with the poor, they love us. And in fact, the end of this book was a long description about how the consultants drove up in their Jeep to the village, and spontaneously the women burst out in song. And they were singing, here are the World Bank, here are the World Bank, they are here to develop us, we hope they won't forget us. And the last line of the book is, will we? And there's this thing about the way the World Bank works. It needs this kind of self-justification. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, it's not like the World Bank is filled with evildoers, a sort of Blofeldian villains who are sitting in leather chairs stroking cats, thinking, how are we going to fuck the third world today? It's not like that. I mean, it's full of very well-meaning people, but they're executing policies that are tremendously bad for developing countries. And the thing is that, as a citizen of Britain and soon the United States, that means that this is being done in my name. the European Union and the United States are among the largest shareholders of of the World Bank, and that means that I am politically responsible for that. The World Bank policies are meant to be the expression of the democratic will of the people of Britain and the United States, and actually taking political responsibility for the damage that these organizations have caused when doing stuff in my name means that at some point you've got to get out there, and so I've protested the actions of the World Bank in a number of places, and I was lucky enough to be part of the World Trade Organization protest. So it's an affiliated, ideologically affiliated organization, is the World Trade Organization, and the World Trade Organization protests in Seattle in 1999. I was one of thousands of organizers on the streets then, actually standing up against a certain vision of what these organizations were doing in our name, against we were standing up against those organizations, and those organizations were pushing a development line, a logic about how the third world should work on the third world in a tremendously undemocratic fashion. And so, I mean, right now, I think now is a good time to learn democracy on the streets. I mean, that may sound radical, but when Al Gore is saying that now's the time for direct action, and when every movement of social change in history has always been achieved not through a ballot box, but through people putting their bodies on the line. I mean, I think that in order for our democracy to survive and to flourish, taking action against the World Bank, but against institutions that operate in our name, that are doing unjust things, is the right thing for any citizen to do. And unfortunately, I've been tear gassed a couple of times. Never arrested though. I've always managed to avoid that. And I've always actually, every time I've been tear gassed, I was actually assembling legally. It was the police that was responsible for getting out of control. But I mean, these have been sort of experiences that I mean, I wouldn't necessarily wish on anyone the tear gas part, but the demonstration part and the marching together part was amazing. And in fact, it was in Seattle in 1999. Where I first came across the sort of full spectrum of this organization called La Via Campesina, which is this international peasant movement of 150 million farmers, landless rural workers, and who have members in many countries, including the United States and Canada, throughout Europe, and of course Africa, Latin America, and Asia. And those moments of learning on the street are, they are tremendous. They're a way of learning to be a citizen, learning to be a small d Democrat, in a way that our schools and our education system really haven't prepared us for. We're not taught to be citizens. And I think that sometimes protests can be a tremendous school for learning how to begin to take responsibility for ourselves.